Welcome to Pigskin Frenzy on this wonderful Tuesday afternoon. Thank you for joining us. I'm Joel Norris, and whether you're watching on YouTube, listening on Spotify, or listening on Podbean, a big thank you for taking some time out of your Tuesday to just sit back, watch, and listen to some college football coverage presented by me. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, leave a like on the episode, and leave a comment down below. If you're listening on Spotify, share around with others. Follow on there as well. Podbean, same thing. If you're listening on there, share around with others and follow on there as well. We have Twitter and we have Facebook. Twitter is at pigskin_frenzy, all lowercase. All you got to do is type that bad boy in on the search engine, follow the page. You'll get episode updates as well as news and highlights from across college and NFL football. Facebook, same thing. All you got to do is type that in on the search engine, and then you'll follow and like the page, and then you'll get episode updates as well as news, highlights, and notifications from across college and NFL football. Okay, big day today. By the way, I'm fired up. I'm just going to let you know now. I am fired up. That theme song gets me fired up every time, for Pigskin Frenzy. So I'm just pumped. College football day today. Spring football was last weekend. It kicked off last weekend, and it was good. I saw some teams that impressed me. Unfortunately, I saw some teams that didn't quite impress. I'm going to mention 3 teams that did, but I'm also going to mention at least one team that did. They need some improvements and they need some help there. So, some top teams rather. So, they look good. Some teams didn't. So we're going to mention that. We're going to talk about some spring results, kicking that off now. I know I've been beating a dead horse with that, but spring football is important. It's one of those things where you need to know how these teams could look in the future and what they need to improve on before fall camp starts and before the 2023 season kicks off. So we're going to talk about some spring results, part 1 of spring results. I'll mention more next week, but then we're going to talk about, teams that are under the radar going into the 2023 season. There are some teams that impressed me last season, and quite frankly, number 1 under the radar team from last season was TCU. They made it to the national championship. They were unranked in the preseason polls to start off week 1 and went undefeated. First-year head coach Sonny Dykes went undefeated with TCU and went to the national championship game. So, it's one of those things where you don't know, what's going to happen in college football. You don't know what's going to happen in football, period. You never know. It could be a shock. Old Dominion could be a Group of 5 team that gets a playoff spot. I'm just saying you never know what's going to happen in college football. It's unpredictable. So, and I'm not saying Old Dominion is going to win it all. I'm just saying you never know what can happen in college football. So we're going to talk about some teams that are under the radar going into the 2023 season and teams that are, I think, are probably going to break out next season. And it wouldn't be a shock that they're under the radar, but also those are the teams that are probably going to break out next season going into 2023. So, and lastly, we're going to mention, and list the last 5 matchups that are essential to the college football playoff race. I know I said last week that 24/7 Sports released an article about the top 10 matchups that are essential and important to the college football playoff race. I mentioned my first 5, and then now, like advertised and like promised, I'm going to mention the last 5, 6 through 10 on the college football, playoff race there. So going to mention it on Pigskin Frenzy. Don't leave yet. Again, I'm going to sit here and say it. Don't leave yet. It's going to be a good episode. Don't leave. Don't, tune out. College football edition of Pigskin Frenzy, kicking it off. And here we go. Let's kick it off with some spring results from this past weekend. Again, spring football, as advertised, is important. It's where you got to know what your team's going to do, what your team's going to look to improve on, and, what to look forward to for the 2023 season. Let's kick it off Thursday. I'm going to go, let's just kick right off. Good. In life, this is going to be, I guess, a good example, I guess. I can compare it there. But in life, you have good news, you have bad news. People like to hear the good news. People like to hear the bad news after. Some people like to hear the bad news first and the good news after. So you know what? For the people who like to hear the bad news first, we're going to kick it off with some bad news. Let's kick it off with this. And Thursday, we're going to kick it off with the Florida Gators. They played Thursday, April 13th. That was their spring game. And when I tuned in on the highlights. I watched some highlights. Not really the highlights. I actually rewatched the game. I tuned in and I rewatched it, and I looked at them and I was thinking, okay, so we were advertised a more high octane offense. We were advertised more of, solid blocking. We were advertised for more of a defense that was electric. One out of a few of those promises that I just mentioned were made. A solid defense. That defense looked pretty good. That defense looks like a defense that could keep up with some teams in the SEC, in the East, and overall whoever they play in the West, most likely. I mean, in LSU. So they looked at solid. They didn't look terrible. However, everything else unfortunately did not look very good. Not a very good spring, for Billy Napier. In my honest opinion, I think talent wise they looked solid, but the play did not show Thursday, April 13th at all. So I didn't really enjoy watching it. I mean, it was one of those things where it was like, oh, and it was one of those things where you like look at them and you're like, I don't like what's going on heading into the season, heading into fall camp. So I was not really impressed with the offense at all. It looked very stagnant. It looked more like, and this is not a knock, but it looked more like how Iowa did, a slow, methodical, pro style type offense. And I get it. The offense let's just say this. How Anthony Richardson ran the offense looked entirely different than how a Graham Mertz, Wisconsin transfer quarterback going to Florida, Graham Mertz, and how Jack Miller both ran the offense. Neither one of them didn't look all that impressive. The blocking didn't look all that impressive except for the run. The run looked solid. The run looked okay, I would assume. The run didn't look, outstanding, but the run didn't, look terrible. So the run was just okay. The passing and the quarterback play was not really all that impressive to me. I wasn't really impressed with how the line blocked. I thought the defense dominated up front, and I feel like there are some things right there that those are some key big things that they need to work on. Billy Napier said that they were planning on adding another quarterback soon, from recruits and going into the fall, and possibly from the transfer portal. The window is starting to open up in the transfer portal, and I mean, here it is. We're here, mid-April, so the second window has opened up already, and we got some transfers lining up already. I'll get into that later in the show, but and name drop some transfers, some two key transfers there. But I mean, we won't get into it a whole bunch, but you know what I mean. I'll name drop some prospects. So, I mean, look, Florida has a whole summer and has, the staff at least has a whole summer and a fall camp to figure things out. I mean, you got until early September. Literally, you got until Labor Day weekend to figure things out. Unless, it's a week 0 game. But, right now for Florida's schedule, it's looking like early September. So you got all these things to figure out, But at the same time, if you are in that mindset of spring, like, yeah, we're going to impress. We're going to go out there, show everybody who Graham Mertz is, or we're going to show everybody who, Jack Miller is. Listen, Graham Mertz is a good, solid quarterback. He's a good pickup in the transfer portal. He looked really, really good in Wisconsin. Don't get me wrong. He looked really good at Wisconsin. He just did not have a good showing today, rather Thursday in Florida. And I don't know. I just didn't. I really wasn't impressed with the whole offensive scheme they were running this past Thursday. Wasn't a good spring, in my honest opinion, for Florida. There's a lot of stuff they need to work on, and I think the offense is a huge factor right there. Replacing an Anthony Richardson is key. I understand that, but you're going to have to, you're going to have to try to compete for at least 8 or 9 wins. Right now they're not a team that that's a team that could go at least 6-6 at best, or maybe even 5-7. And that's not where you want to be. Because from a year ago, they were at 6-6. It was a rebuilding first year head coach year. Now, Billy Napier's got 1 year of experience at Florida, and he's looking to upgrade a little bit. He's looking to upgrade to an 8 or 9 win season, and eventually a double-digit win season to try to lead them to a playoff. And that's what the whole goal is about. If you're in that Southeastern Conference, or if you're at a program like Florida, you want to lead them to a title. That play's not going to do it, unfortunately. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I mean, it's not. It's not. That doesn't look good at all. So, I mean, to try to challenge for 8 or 9 wins and to surprise some teams going into, going into the season. I mean, first game they got is against Utah. They got to play Utah coming up, and it's in Utah. It's at Salt Lake City, so they got to go up from their comfort zone, go up to an environment that's, it's up north. It's out up northwest, and it's a little out of their comfort zone a little bit. So to kick things off, with the spring they had, if this transitions into fall, things aren't looking to look good for that opener against Utah. So, I mean, they're going to have to try to find a way to change some things. But, I mean, could they do it? Absolutely. It's just the spring. Again, it's just the spring. But having a good spring to motivate yourself to go into fall camp and get ready for the opener on September 2nd is one of those things where you're looking back and you're like, okay, we need to get ready for that. So, I mean, it was tough, but I mean, they can get through it. But right now, it wasn't the best, spring, but I mean, they can try to get through it. So, I mean, Florida not with a good spring. That's just my take. If it doesn't get better, I don't expect the season to turn out how it panned out for them in their vision. So, that's just my take on it. I think Florida needs to do a lot better and needs to improve on their offense. Offense is number one right now. Their defense looks solid. Offense did not look good at all. So that was Florida on Saturday. Let's move on to USC. They played Saturday, and let me go on and tell you something. USC still looks solid. USC looks good. I think their defense still needs to be worked on. That was my only improvement with them. Like I said in the preview from last week, I think their defense needs to be worked on, and I keep pressing this issue. Their defense needs to play a lot better, and they need to coach a lot better on defense, because you're going to have more games like Utah twice and Tulane in the Cotton Bowl last season, and it's going to catch up to you. Your defense ends up getting tired, and then you find an offense that, you find an actual offense that, beats out their defense, that tires them out, but your opponent also has a solid defense enough to keep up with that USC offense, and then it merges, and then that's how they beat you, So it's like they need to keep up on defense. That offense is solid, and as an offense that's high octane, and as an offense that scores points. That's Lincoln Riley's memo, man. I mean, it is. It was like that for the past 5-6 years at Oklahoma, now, and it was like that his first year at USC. They were the Pac-12 runner-ups for a reason last year and went to the Cotton Bowl. So it's their memo. It's their thing. High octane offense. That's why Caleb Williams won the Heisman Trophy, and he was probably the best quarterback of last season. I mean, up there with C.J. Stroud, maybe even Bryce Young. So listen, it's a high octane offense. It was, really, really good. You just got to have the perfect defense to match that intensity and to match what they're doing, because you need to have a defense that can play solid. And if you have a defense that plays solid, that offense will do a lot of the work for y'all as well. That's how you get to the college football playoff, and that's how you probably get to the national championship and to compete. Listen, USC has talent, okay? I'm not taking anything away from that. USC has talent. They got Caleb Williams. They have Mario Williams. They have, solid players and solid playmakers on their team to make a championship run happen and to probably win the Pac-12 title. So, USC is looking solid. They look good on offense, but they just need the defense to work. So the defense needs to be improved on a little bit more. That's the only thing I took away that needs to be worked on for USC is their defense. Still defensive woes there. They got to push on that. However, their offense looks solid. The rest of the team looks solid. Mario Williams and Caleb Williams had a good one series. I would say Caleb Williams had good one series, and he led them to a touchdown. So, Caleb Williams, automatic starter. We already know he's the Heisman winner. He's going to start at USC this season. So at USC, good things happening there. I liked their backup quarterback. I liked Miller Moss. Miller Moss looked very impressive for USC. So I think USC looked impressive on offense. Defense still needs to be worked on. Miller Moss looked really good. He looks like the quarterback for USC's future. I think the Trojans have no problem at quarterback. I mean, Miller Moss looks good, and we saw a little bit of Malachi Nelson. Malachi Nelson, the high school recruit from USC, going into USC his first year, he looked really solid. So it's going to be a battle between Miller Moss and and Malachi Nelson for the starting job at SC next year. So, I mean, when Caleb Williams goes to the draft, so. I honestly think that Miller Moss and USC's new highly touted recruit in Malachi Nelson look solid. So it's gonna look good. I mean, their quarterback future looks good. Their future in the quarterback room looks solid. So I mean, everything looked fine on the offensive side of the ball. It was just mainly the defensive woes. I liked it. I think USC this year will be a top 5 team starting out. Who knows how the season's going to play out? They could drop a game or two. They could go undefeated, go to the playoffs, could win the national title. I'm not saying that. I'm saying right now, starting off, they look like a top 5 team. So that's just my opinion that's my take on USC and their spring game. Still need to work on their defense. I think that's what could give them trouble going into the season. But they clean that up and have a solid defense and work on that and just maintain it. I think they're a top 5 team going into the season. I think they're a team that needs to be looked out for per usual. So USC looks solid except on defense this past Saturday in the spring game. Another one, Ohio State. Obviously, Ohio State. Now I'm just going to sit there and say this right now. The only thing that I would improve on is their press coverage. Other than that, the rest of their defense looked fine, and the offense looked fine. It looked good. I liked what Devin Brown brought to the table. I liked what Kyle McCord brings to the table. It's just a matter of, okay, who you're going to start. And before anything we get further into Ohio State, prayers go out to Brian Hartland. He is the offensive coordinator for Ohio State. Prayers go out to him. He was involved in a UTV crash. So prayers for him. And I think, he is doing okay. Fortunately, he is doing much better, but prayers for him as he recovers and, as he gets well. So Brian Hartland, the offensive coordinator for Ohio State, that offense looked good. That offense did look good under McCord's command and under Brown's command. It looked solid. You have Marvin Harrison Jr. You have Stover. You have a lot of those guys. You have Kayvon Henderson. You have Mayan Williams in the ground game. You have a lot of those players out there that are going to make some plays, and all you got to do is deliver the ball to them. You give Marvin Harrison Jr. the ball, and he's going to make something happen. He's bound to. He's probably the best receiver coming back in college football, and he is. They're not ashamed to admit that, because I think a lot of fans from a lot of teams are saying, "Man, I wish I had a Marvin Harrison Jr." So, I mean, Marvin Harrison's good. They're all back. They look solid. I like Ohio State. I think they're a top 5 team going in. Excuse me. I think they're a top 3 team going into the college football season. A top 3 team. And I'll later on in the summer, and as college football comes closer, I'll give you my preseason poll predictions. I'm not going to give them to you now. It's just way too early, so you can't do that. But starting off now, I think Ohio State is a top 5 team in college football, though. So I think they look good. I think they look impressive. I think that they look like they are ready to go into fall camp with utmost confidence and ready to see what they can do, coming up this season with either Kyle McCord starting or Devin Brown starting. So they look good. So moving on, we're going to move on to Texas. I was impressed with Texas. Again, I mean, the thing they need to improve on is, I would say, in the quarterback realm, timing and execution. We saw Arch Manning. Arch Manning looked, he looked good. He looked like a freshman. I mean, and as everyone's like, Joel Norris, you're talking about a Manning like that. Listen, he will be a top quarterback in the future. He will be. He's born and bred for this game. Look, and if you don't believe, he's born and bred for the game. You see his last name? You see what it says on his last name? Manning. He is born and bred to play football. Manning is a football name. Even though it's Cooper's oldest son, and Cooper had to retire early, unfortunately, Arch Manning is it's Manning. It's still a Manning name. It's the Mannings. Eli, Archie, Peyton. They all played football. They all had Hall of Fame careers. Who knows? Arch could have that career also. So, and I think he will. I think Arch will be a solid quarterback going into the future. Quinn Ewers looked phenomenal. I think Quinn Ewers has gotten a lot better since last season, and he's been working on it in the spring. His development is gone on. As advertised. I mean, Texas head coach Steve Sarkisian has said, "Hey, Quinn Ewers, don't count him out. He's looked good." We're going to talk about that in a minute. But I think the press coverage on defense needs a little bit of work. It's a little bit better, but it needs a little bit more work. I think their defense looked okay. I didn't think their defense looked bad. And I'm going to name drop a transfer portal here. After the spring game happened, former Minnesota defensive tackle Trill Carter has announced that he is transferring to Texas, so he'll be with them in the fall, and I think he'll help out the up front part of their defense. Trill Carter, the newly transferred Texas defensive tackle, came from Minnesota, Big Ten honoree, all Big Ten honoree. He was really good at Minnesota. Now he's coming to Texas and Austin, and he's going to try to help them out up front. So Trill Carter, defensive tackle from Minnesota, transferring to Texas. So that's going to help them out front on defense. So let's move on. Let's just get further into Texas here. So yes, I think that Texas needs a little bit of work on the press coverage and a little bit of work on defense. Not too much. Their defense looked okay. It may give up some big plays, so when you just work on a little bit of that. But other than that, their defense was okay. They had some bright spots. So I think it's little minor adjustments to clean up and in order to get ready for fall camp, some minor adjustments, but not too much. I'm actually really high on Texas. I think their players are really good. I think they got a good running back in Killian Robinson. Killian Robinson is going to most likely is the guy to replace Bijan Robinson. So another Robinson happening here. Killian Robinson, he looks really solid. I think he looks like a good runner for Texas. I honestly like the two receivers out that they got now. Georgia transfer Adonai Mitchell, A.D. Mitchell. If you do not know him, A.D. Mitchell, he played in the national championship game for Georgia in that dominant performance against TCU. And guess who's back? Xavier Worthy, junior wide receiver now. Both juniors, by the way, A.D. Mitchell and Xavier Worthy from Texas. So they got two weapons there, and they look solid. They look really good in their spring game on Saturday. So, and then Quinn Ewers. I mean, obviously, he's developed nicely. Quinn Ewers looks solid. I think they look solid. I think they look like a top 15 team starting out. I would say a top 15 team starting out and working its way up to a top 10 team. So careful how you view Texas this year. I think Texas is going to be a team where you're going to have to watch out for them. They had Alabama on the ropes, even with Quinn Ewers hurt. Think about Quinn Ewers, a fully healthy 100% Quinn Ewers playing against Alabama. You shrug. You can see what happens. It's even though it's in Tuscaloosa, I wouldn't count them out. Honestly, I wouldn't count them out against Alabama. They look solid. They don't look bad at all. I mean, we're going to see how they look against them, and we're going to see how they look coming up on September 2nd against SMEO. So we're going to see how they look against them coming up, and then we're going to see how they look against Alabama in week 2. But I think Texas looks strong right now, and they've had a good spring game. They do look solid, and they look like they're ready to make a run. So which is actually kind of surprising. We haven't seen Texas make a run in a while, so we're going to see how they do. So that was the spring results for spring football, and we're going to have more next week because spring games are going to continue on until May 6th. We'll have a lot of main teams are playing April 22nd, so which is this Saturday. So we'll have more to talk about there for everything going around. So I can't wait. I'm excited. I'm really looking forward to that, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how everybody shapes up and, how everybody is looking going into the fall camp. So let's move on from spring, results, but sort of moving on from spring results, but not really. But we're going to keep on the topic of Texas. So after the headline, and this is what I was going to bring. Remember when I said I was going to bring on to a later point with Quinn Ewers. Now we're going to bring on the later point. I thought that this battle was going to go on for a while. I thought this battle was going to happen for a little bit. I don't know. And I was like so shocked when I saw this. I thought it was going to happen, for longer. I thought they were going to do the Jim Harbaugh approach and start one in the first half, start the other one in the second half. They did not. And I was shocked. I was like, okay. It took me off guard. But nonetheless, it's official. They have named a starting quarterback. Texas has named quarterback Quinn Ewers the starting quarterback for the 2023 college football season. Okay. So do I agree with it? Yes. I'll tell you why I agree with it. Arch Manning is a solid quarterback. He will be a solid quarterback. However, he's still a freshman, and he looked like a freshman. He looked like he had some moments where, okay, he could have done that better, and he could have done that better. His head will be a lot better once he gets the reps in and gets the experience in. But I think coming up in this season, backing up Quinn Ewers will be good, because next year, when he has a full season practicing and getting ready for the big moment, Arch Manning will take advantage of that moment, and he will be the quarterback for Texas's future as they go into the Southeastern Conference and the SEC in the 2024 season. So they're going into that season like, okay, we're counting on you to lead us into the SEC and to kick us off at the SEC. So a little bit, in a way, that's high praise coming from Steve Sarkisian. It is high praise when you look at it. We're relying on you as the new quarterback for Texas after Quinn Ewers leaves, and you will be an SEC quarterback. So we're counting on you. So that's next year. So that's a little bit of a pressure point, and that's a thing that Arch Manning can build on and look forward to next year. So it's not a discouraging moment. It's a teaching moment for, hey, you can learn a little bit more and get ready for the SEC, which is, kind of like, okay, I'm going to get ready for that. And he's a solid quarterback, and we're going to, build him up for next year as our new quarterback for next year. Quinn Ewers is ready now. And I think that's why I agree with Steve Sarkisian. He told reporters this after the spring game, immediately after the spring game. He led them to a touchdown on their drive, on one of their opening drives. Quinn Ewers did. He's developed nicely. He's smart, and he's got a cannon for an arm. He is a top NFL prospect coming up in 2024, in the 2024 NFL draft, assuming that he declares for the NFL. Now, if he throws a curveball and says, I'm staying another year at Texas, then we're going to have to decide the Arch Manning thing. So that we're going to have to reevaluate all that. But right now, way too early predictions from a year out from now are pointing towards Quinn Ewers declaring for the draft in 2024. So, who knows? You never know what can happen in college football or in football for that matter. But right now, we're talking about Quinn Ewers as the starting quarterback for Texas, and he looks solid. He looks like he's developing, coming along nicely. Steve Sarkisian has high praise for him. He's got a solid arm. He's smart as a quarterback. He's ready to take the reins as the starting quarterback this season, and I think it's his time to start. So Quinn Ewers is named the starting quarterback for the Texas Longhorns, and good on Steve Sarkisian and good on Quinn Ewers. And Arch Manning will develop nicely. I think he's the quarterback for the future. So they just got to get him ready for the SEC next season, and they got to get him ready under Quinn Ewers. So Quinn Ewers named the starting quarterback. Happened a lot sooner than I expected, but, it happens. It's college football. So moving on from the spring in Texas, and we're going to move on to players under the radar. So I was in Lawrence, Kansas the other day, and this is, leading into my choice right now. I was in Lawrence, Kansas the other day, home of the University of Kansas, the Jayhawks, the Rock Chalk. So I was home of, I was over there, home of the Kansas, Jayhawks. So yeah, it was a good time, a blast. I posted on Facebook. Go check it out on there, Pigskin Frenzy, and you'll see the video I made there. I was talking about what we were going to talk about on the show coming up Tuesday, and behind me was the stadium. It looked nice. It was a beautiful campus. Everything around it was, nice, solid. And it looked, looked like they were, it looked like a lively atmosphere up in Lawrence. So, Kansas is a team, and they're my number one team of under the radar going into the college football 2023 season. So that's what I'm going to talk about right now. under the radar teams going into 2023. So, like, again, let's kick it off. Number one, Kansas. Kansas looks like a team that could be, a team to fear almost. I mean, they could be. Listen, Kansas was 6-0 last season before they played TCU. They lost to TCU, but Kansas was undefeated going into that game. They were undefeated going into October. Did they have a 6-game losing skid after the TCU game? Unfortunately, they did. Yes, they did. It sucks. It's a harsh reality. However, I mean, they looked solid going into that game. 6-0, undefeated. They had quarterback Jalen Daniels. Jalen Daniels, he's coming back next year. That's a sigh of relief for Kansas. He's coming back next year, and he's going to lead this team with Kansas head coach Lance Leipold. Lance Leipold is a solid coach. He's building something up there in Kansas. So, I mean, Lawrence, Kansas should be buzzing with, and they got some good defensive players. One of them is OJ Burrows. OJ Burrows looks solid. He's a good defensive back. He looks like he's gonna make a run on that defense and lead that defense and try to make them something to watch and something to fear for offenses on Saturday. So, I mean, Jalen Daniels with his feet and what he can do with his arm and what he can do in his precision is unbelievable. So, Jalen Daniels is going to be a underrated quarterback choice, and they're going to be an under the radar team for going into the 2023 season. They look like they're ready to make some noise up in the Rock Chalk. So, we're going to see what Kansas does. My take is number one, Kansas. I think they're an under the radar team going into 2023. Another one is right across the state, and it's in Manhattan, Kansas State, another one of their rivals. So Kansas State was led by head coach Chris Kleiman. Unbelievable. They went to the Sugar Bowl last season. They played Alabama. Unfortunately, they lost. But Kansas State looks like they're ready to make some noise. They do. I mean, they have a senior quarterback, Will Howard. Will Howard looks like a really, really good starting quarterback for them. He played solid up until the Sugar Bowl. Even though, I mean, he played good in the Sugar Bowl. He looked really, really good. Deuce Vaughn leaves, unfortunately, but they have a good running back that's going to replace him. And DJ Giddens. DJ Giddens looks really solid. He looks like he's going to make a prime run at the starting position at running back for Kansas State. They look solid on defense. They're a very underrated team. I expect them. And by the way, may I remind you, they won the Big 12 last year. TCU was not undefeated going into the national championship. They had a win-loss, and it was against Kansas State. Kansas State won the Big 12 title. They're the defending Big 12 champions. They are hungry and ready to make another run at that title and potentially, college football playoff. It's Kansas State. We're knocking at the door. So they're looking at that, at that spot, and they're ready to break out even more. So Kansas State was a breakout team last season. They're looking to break out even more. So they're under the radar, in my opinion. And I think Kansas State's looking to make another run behind Chris Kleiman, Will Howard, offensive coordinator and former quarterback for Kansas State, Colin Klein, and could be new running back DJ Giddens. So, I mean, Kansas State looks good there. Another team, Washington Huskies, led by head coach Caden DeBoer, offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb, and quarterback Michael Penix Jr. He came from Indiana, he transferred to Washington. He played there last season. He announced that he was coming back for one more run. He is a dark horse for the Heisman Trophy. In my honest opinion, he's one of the best quarterbacks, in my opinion, in college football. He looked really, really good for Washington. They went into the Alamo Bowl. They beat Texas, looked really solid there. I think they're going to be a solid team. And in my mind, gonna point this out there, they look like a top 10 team going into this season, and they are a very, very solid team. They are an under the radar team. They're not, and I'm not gonna say they're not a preseason playoff prediction, but they look like they are ready to make a run at a Pac-12 title, and they look like they're ready to make a run in the Pac-12 in general. They look good, high octane offense. Defense is in the middle. I mean, they do some good things, they do bad things. It's one of those things on defense, but their defense is solid enough to carry them to games and carrying them to victories. So their offense is high octane. Their defense is okay. So I think Washington is an under-the-radar team and looking to make some noise there. Last but not least, and I'm going to keep beating the dead horse on this because they are, in my opinion, a top 10 team because of what they did last season. It's Florida State. Mike Norvell, Jordan Travis on one end, and then you got the defense with Jared Verse, who's coming back for one more year. You got two players coming back for one more year and who are ready to make some noise in the ACC. And in my mind, probably the top pick in the ACC. So you're looking and you're like, Joel, why are they an under-the-radar team? I consider them more an under-the-radar but breakout team who's going to make some more noise going into this year. Do not forget about Florida State at all this coming up season. I think Florida State's season is going to be a solid one. I think Florida State has a tough test against LSU coming up, but they also have a tough test against Clemson. But at the same time, the rest of that schedule pans out. They are probably going to be favored in all those games. I think after last season and what they did, they look like they are prime and ready to make some noise. Clearly, they have a Heisman favorite in Jordan Travis, solid quarterback there. They're ready to make some noise, man. I think Florida State Seminoles and Mike Norvell is ready to make that extra push to try to win an ACC title and to potentially make the college football playoff. So they're ready to make some noise there and ready to have a breakout and a breakout season. Those are my four teams who are under the radar going into this season and who are ready to break out and make that run and make that push going into the 2023 season. Keep an eye out for these teams, man. Kansas. Jalen Daniels looks solid. Will Howard at Kansas State. Kansas State looks solid. Jordan Travis at Florida State looks good. Michael Penix Jr. and that offense at Washington up north look solid. So look out for those teams who are under the radar, in my opinion. And who knows, they could be top 15, might even be top 10 potential this season. So, I mean, it looks really, really good. Watch out for those teams who are under the radar and looking to break out in college football this season. So moving on, I said I was going to get to this, and it's the last 5 matchups that is essential to the college football playoff race. We're not going to wait any longer. So 1 through 5, not in any particular order. I'm just, going, by with the 5 first matchups that I listed last week. I mentioned LSU and Alabama. I mean, obviously, it's a key matchup going into the SEC West race and the SEC race on who's going to face potentially either a Georgia or most likely could be Tennessee, who knows, but mainly a Georgia who's probably an obvious favorite to win the SEC East and the SEC championship game in Atlanta. So I mentioned LSU, Georgia. I mentioned another one. I mentioned our Florida State Clemson. I think Florida State Clemson is going to be a matchup that is solid in the ACC, and who could potentially lead one of those teams to an ACC title game. So Florida State Clemson. I mentioned Ohio State Michigan, and who knows? They're getting rid of divisions. They could rematch. So who knows? Rematch for the Big Ten title. The game on Thanksgiving, and then a Part 2 rematch on the first weekend of December this year. So who knows? Who knows what could happen? The game, and that could impact the college football race as well, as always, as it usually does. It usually does. So we could have 2 big teams in there again like last season. So, who knows with that one. Another one I mentioned is Florida State LSU. That's a huge opener for both teams. I mean, it's probably going to be a top 10 matchup this season. Last season, it was unranked for both. It was on a Sunday in New Orleans. Classic game, back and forth, 1-point loss for LSU. Florida State wins that one in a thriller, and it kicked off a run for Florida State that was undeniable. They went into the I think it was the Cheez-It Bowl in Orlando, and they looked really, really good against Oklahoma, and they had a dominant win over them there. It was a close game, but I mean, they looked dominant on the offensive side of the ball for sure. So Florida State had a good, solid run there. LSU, we didn't know what was going to happen with them, but LSU kickstarted Brian Kelly's first season. No turning back. They were against the odds. They beat those odds, won the West, and suffered a heartbreaking loss to Georgia, but then they bounced back and beat Purdue in the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl in Orlando. So dominated Purdue, by the way, 63-7 win for LSU. So LSU looks like a top 10 team. Florida State looks like a top 10 team. I'm ready to go for that one on Labor Day weekend. That one looks good. So we got that one. Then the last game I mentioned was Oregon and USC. I mentioned Oregon and USC, and I think USC and Oregon both look solid. I want to see how USC's defense is going to handle against Bo Nix. Bo Nix will be much improved, and he's going to try to go out on a limb for Oregon and try to make his last college football season look solid. So it's going to look good. Dan Lanning is doing something amazing up there with his top 5 recruiting class. He's doing something, and Lincoln Riley, I mean, with Caleb Williams, Heisman winner, and I mean, he's got a lot of talent on offense, and the defense is a question mark, but let's see how it fares against an Oregon on November 13th. So that's a key game that we got to watch out for both teams. So that was the 5 I mentioned last week. So let's mention 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 now. So let's go into this one. So first off, the last one, we're going to mention Alabama and Tennessee. That's one that we got to look at and think, okay, Tennessee, they lost Hendon Hooker. They lost Jalen Hyatt. Cedric Tillman's out. They lost all these guys. They got Jabari Small, though. They got Jalen Wright. They have a good quarterback in Joe Milton. Do not forget about Joe Milton. He will be one of the top quarterbacks in college football. And mark my words, he has improved. He's got his decision-making skills have gotten a lot better. He's more crisp. And let me tell you, he has got probably, along with Quinn Ewers, one of the best cannons of an arm that I have seen. And that's high praise. He's got one of the best arms I've seen. And like literally, he can launch it. He launched a ball in practice. It was a 65-yard pass. Oh my gosh. Like literally, that's what I said when I saw it. When he launched the football, I was like, oh my gosh. He's got a cannon. He can launch it. That offense is going to look good this season with Joe Milton under center. And Josh Heupel has given him the keys there. Who knows what Tennessee's going to do? They thought Tennessee was going to be good this season. Josh Heupel's like, no, we're going to show you in the spring and in the fall why Tennessee is here to stay and why they look good in the East and in the SEC overall. So Tennessee is going to bring it their all. They're going to go to Tuscaloosa. And Alabama has some question marks. Who's going to start Who's going to start and replace Bryce Young? What's their running game going to look like? Who are the receivers? Who's going to break out? Is it going to be Ja'Cory Brooks? I mean, and I would expect that Ja'Cory Brooks to be the leading receiver along with Kobe Prentice going in for Alabama this coming up season. They have a factor. His name is Nick Saban. Hello, Nick Saban. Y'all already know who he is, but he's the greatest coach of our generation. But I mean, Alabama is going to have some question marks as always, but they're undefeated, and they usually win a national title under a first-year starter and two new coordinators. So Alabama looks completely. They have a different scheme. Tommy Rees, the new offensive coordinator for Alabama, came from Notre Dame. Then you have the defensive coordinator. You have Kevin Steele, who's back at Alabama there. So we're going to see how they look. Alabama, Tennessee. Tennessee defeated Alabama for the first time in 15 years in Neyland Stadium. Now it's the rematch. We're going to see what Alabama does against Tennessee now. We're going to see how Tennessee looks there. That's a huge matchup that's going to take place, and it's going to shape, in the middle of October where the playoff standings are now, and what takes shape there. And it's going to kick off a lot for the college football playoff. And let's see how those two teams fare there. So that's one essential matchup for the college football playoff. Going into that's the 6th one, going into number 7, you would assume, but not in any particular order. Alabama and Texas. I think Alabama and Texas is one that's going to, it's an early matchup, week 2, but it's going to show and go, okay, what's the resume it's going to look like on each? If Texas beats an Alabama week 2, that's an early loss for Alabama, and that's something we're not used to seeing from Alabama. Alabama hadn't lost early in a long time. And, Texas is going to look at that and feel like, okay, we had them on the ropes last season with Bryce Young there. And with Quinn Ewers hurt, let's see what 100% healthy Quinn Ewers is going to do against a team that doesn't have a Will Anderson, doesn't have an Eli Riggs, doesn't have a Bryce Young or Jameer Gibbs, that has 2 new coordinators and that has a first-year starter at quarterback. But don't make, any assumptions with that, because they are usually, like I said before, undefeated and win a national championship with 2 first-year coordinators and a first-year starter at quarterback. So let's just sit there and, think about this for a second. Alabama and Texas is a matchup that could be essential to both playoff races. And a win over Alabama could do wonders for Texas, because if they beat everybody else out and they have a one loss to a Kansas State, or even go undefeated into the Big 12 championship game, they will sneak in. They won't even sneak in. They will be a top 4 team, and they will go to the college football playoff if they are undefeated and have a win against Alabama, or even have a win against a top 15 or top 10 ranked Kansas State, or Kansas, or whoever is ranked at that time. So resumes in this game mean everything. On the flip side, if Alabama beats Texas, not just beats Texas, say they dominate them and Texas ends up beating everybody else and it's a one-loss team and they're ranked, that's going to do wonders for Alabama. That's a Kickstarter for them to go to the playoff. So that's going to do wonders. That's a very important matchup and essential to the college football playoff race heading into 2023. Another one, and this is the 8th matchup, you can say, is Ohio State and Penn State. Penn State is a team to look out for. They are the 3rd best team essentially in the race for, in the Big Ten. So, and they are a dark horse for the college football playoff. You can keep saying that, but James Franklin is a phenomenal coach. They're a phenomenal team with him there. So you can say the same thing. Drew Allard is their new quarterback. We're going to see how he does against a solid Ohio State defense. On the flip side, you can say, who is in command? Is it going to be Kyle McCord or Devin Brown for Ohio State? That offense is going to look solid either way, especially with playmakers like Kevion Henderson, Brian Williams, and Marvin Harrison Jr. at wide receiver. So Ohio State is going to look good either way, but this matchup overall, because Penn State had them on the ropes until Ohio State ran away with it last season, it's a matchup that's going to look good for both teams going into the playoff race this year. So that's essential. That matchup is going to look very solid there. The 9th matchup I'm going to mention is USC and Utah. USC and Utah, a rematch from last season in October and rematch from last year in the Pac-12 title game. That's gonna be solid. But maybe both teams are undefeated. It maybe, it's going to be 2 teams that are, looking to, take shape, I think, and look to try to sneak into the playoff as a Pac-12 contender. I think USC is going to look solid. Yet again, it's about their defense. I question what the defense is going to look like. I question what the defense is going to do against a strong Utah team that's returning most of their players, including quarterback Cam Rising. Utah looked very good in the Pac-12 title game. They looked good in their first matchup against USC, even though it was a 1-point win. They dominated USC in the rematch of the Pac-12 title game. So I want to see what that defense does. Utah's defense looks solid. Their offense is going to look good and in command with a veteran quarterback with Cam Rising. I want to see how that matchup is going to take shape. And if Utah goes undefeated up into the Pac-12 title game, that was my knock. That was my knock, because what they're doing is they're knocking, and that door is going to say college football playoff with that little bronze trophy. Yeah, they're going to do, and they're going to knock on the door at that number 4 spot. So we're going to see what happens if USC picks up their defensive woes. Again, I'm going to make the noise. They're knocking at the door. So, that's an essential matchup for both teams in the college football playoff race. I think we've mentioned that was 9, right? We mentioned 4 so far. We mentioned Alabama and Tennessee, Ohio State, Penn State, Alabama and Texas, USC, Utah. We're going to mention the last one now. Here's the last one, the 10th one, and that was my top 10, and that rounds out my top 10 for essential matchups for the playoff. We're going to mention it. Here we go. It's Notre Dame and Ohio State. And Notre Dame and Ohio State, and I was going to give a long pause. I know who it was. I just wanted to drag it out. But Ohio State and Notre Dame. Ohio State, this adds on to the resume if Notre Dame's in a top 15 scenario. They will be in a top 15 scenario. I think I would rank them at number 12, 11 in that spot there. But Notre Dame looked good in the late last season. Marcus Freeman did a heck of a job turning that team around last season. They made it to a bowl game. They looked good in that bowl game against South Carolina, the Gator Bowl in South Carolina. So, listen, I think that Notre Dame's going to be a team to watch out for. I'm not going to mention any playoff predictions for them, but they're always a team that you look at and be like, okay, let's watch out for them, especially with their new quarterback, Wake Forest grad transfer, Sam Hartman, now a part of the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. He's going to lead that team, and we're going to see how that offense does with him at the helm. So here's the kicker. It's at South Bend, Indiana. We're going to see what Sam Hartman does, a solid quarterback, is going to do under center against an Ohio State defense that's pretty solid. So Ohio State goes on the road, faces Sam Hartman and Notre Dame. We're going to see what happens there. So I'm excited. I'm pumped about it. Ohio State, this is going to do wonders for them if they beat a Notre Dame. So it's going to look solid on both ends. Both resumes here could look good and help their playoff chances. Notre Dame needs this one a little bit more than Ohio State to get that redemption and to kickstart their resume and their run of, okay, hey, we have a good record here. We beat Ohio State, who's a top team in the college football, and we're going to need this. So I think Notre Dame, this is going to look good for their record and their resume in the college football playoff. But nonetheless, it's going to look good for both teams. It's going to look good for Ohio State as well. So that's just my top 10. That's all my top 10. And those are the matchups that are, in my opinion, essential to the college football playoff race in 2023. And as we move closer, we're going to talk more about these games. But, I mean, those are the top 10 and essential matchups that look good for college football and plus the race for the college football playoff. They do an excellent job at deciding these matchups. And they do an excellent job at deciding who's going to get in. It's a hard job. So those matchups are going to be the ones that you're going to have to take into consideration for, looking into when deciding who are the top 4 teams in the college football playoff in 2023. So that just about does it. That wraps everything up. A big thank you for taking some time out of your Tuesday to sit back, watch, and listen to some college football coverage presented by me again. So if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel. Leave a like on the episode and leave a comment down below. Spotify, for listening on there, share around with others, and follow on there as well. Podbean, if you're listening on there, again, share around with others and follow on there as well. Twitter, at Pigskin_Frenzy, all lowercase. All you got to do is type that bad boy in. You'll follow and like the page there, and you'll get episode updates and notifications and news and highlights from across college and NFL football. Facebook, same thing. All you got to do is type in Pigskin Frenzy. You'll get episode updates and you'll get highlights and news and notifications from across college and NFL football if you follow and like the page there. That just about does it. Sorry, my words are getting tied up. So excited about talking about college football. So that just about does it. Big thank you for taking some time out of your Tuesday once again. Also, NFL edition of Pigskin Frenzy Thursday. I'm excited. Got a lot to talk about, including the upcoming NFL draft. That's next week. I'm pumped. NFL edition of Pigskin Frenzy Thursday. I'm Joel Norris signing off, and we will see you guys Thursday for Pigskin Frenzy.